we're going to pick up framing this side over here. That's where we're going to start this project. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how we frame this out, and then we're going to do the rest of the framing on this back wall and just kind of go from there. Okay, so my platform is 20 inches deep by 36 inches wide. I just made it that way because 3 on here and 3 on that side, that's 6 foot. That gives me 14 foot of workbench in the center. I've already framed a stud in here, top to bottom, and tied it into that truss. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get my corner and then go up and tie that in. And then once I got that, then I could put another stud here on this back side and just kind of box it in. Guys, you're going to see me use this tool a lot. It is a Bosch laser measure, and I'll leave the link to this in the description. But man, this is like one of my most valuable tools that I have for running trim work and finding measurements. Me laying this flat on that platform just gave me a very accurate measurement to the bottom of that truss at 8'5" and 7/16. This tool is one of my favorite tools that I have, and it is a lifesaver, especially when you're doing work like this by yourself. Got the corner installed, and then on the bottom there's another piece I scabbed in. Guys, I was working with 8-foot stock. If you remember, that measurement is like 8'5" and some change. So just working with what I got. So these 2 studs on this corner are tied together and then tied in top and bottom with 3-inch decking or construction screws. Guys, I don't own a nail gun. Out of all the junk I own, I don't have a nail gun. So all of the construction for the main framing is going to be done with screws. So I'm using the 3-inch. I'm using a variety of recycled construction screws, and I've got a bunch of the Uber grade construction screws as well, just depending on what I'm tying together, but it's all done with construction screws. I leveled everything exactly where I wanted it, front to back, and then side to side, got it level, made some marks up top, and then I tied it in with my screws. The old saying is, the level never lies. Another thing I did was, once I got all this plumbed, I checked my measurement because I know that this is where it needs to be. I was 29 inches across to this opening at the bottom, and then I ended up being within a 1/16, so 29 inches across this opening from top to bottom. So that kind of told me that this was where it needed to be, and I can move on and tie it in. Every board I use, I'm checking my crown and I'm marking them. So I wanted this board to be an outside corner and this to go up and this to be the face. That's just how I crowned it, and I looked at it. And I do that because, man, boards are going to have bows. They're going to have barked edges, knots, cracks, splits. And even this one has a split, and I purposely put it on the outside because this outside is going to get covered with plywood, and I didn't want it visible on the inside that's going to be exposed. So that's just how I do it. It's an old habit of mine of just checking all my boards and calling them and using them the best way that I see fit in their specific application. Okay, got this 2x4 tied in. I did some dead wood up top so I could tie in up top when I go this way. Went ahead and ran a 2x6 across the top. It ties everything in together, and then it also is 5.5 inches rough frame. That way, that'll give me enough room when I build my doors for my doors to overlap that 2x6, and then I'll have about 3 more inches above those doors to run a 1x2 or a 1x3 or even a piece of crown trim across the top to give it a finished look. So just trying to think ahead of what I want the end result to look like and be, and framing for it in advance. Okay, so this cabinet's going to be different from the one I did initially. Again, this is long-term going to be for boat motors under here, And then up top, I've got these shelving units that are going to go in that will perfectly fit one of these totes. This one's going to be different, guys. I'm going to actually do a wall on the inside and leave this whole side completely open with one large door. And this is going to be my fishing rod storage. Then on this side, what I'm going to do, and you can kind of see here, I've done some layout marks, is I'm going to have 6 shelves going up that are going to be 1 foot apart shelves. So this is all going to be shelving unit on one side and completely open on the other side. So since plywood is going to go on the inside of this wall, I'm going to mount a ledger board here, and I'm going to do one on the back side. But I want to make sure that when I mount this, I inset it just enough to where this plywood can sit flush with this outside edge. So what I've done is I've cut a piece of the material that I'm going to be plywooding this wall with, and I'm just using this as a gauge. And as I attach this 2x2 to the back side of this 2x4, I'm just coming in and I'm putting my gauge and I'm getting that flush. Okay, that's how I want my end result. And then I'm screwing and attaching this 2x2 to the 2x4. The next step is to go ahead and put my blocking in. What I'm going to do on this shelf system on this side is just going to be a smaller version of what I did over here on this side. Essentially, I'm going to take 2x4 blocking and plug it in between where my shelves are going to go. Then I could come in with my 2x2 construction and put that in place, and then leave myself a lip for my plywood to go, and then I'm going to end up capping it with a 2x4. I'm going to start at the top on a stool and then work my way down, because what I've come to find is if I start at the bottom and work my way up, then I can't step inside to work. And so it's much easier to go from top to bottom. But to do that, you've got to be real accurate with your measurements and plan everything out accordingly. Got my gauge again for my plywood. This is going to represent my plywood shelf that's going in here. I want to explain this. Where this 2x4 brace is that from the top of this measurement is exactly where I want the top of my shelf to be. So what I've done is I've taken my gauge and I've butted it flush with the top of that wood that's representing the top of the shelf, and I've made a mark underneath it. Now this mark is going to be where I mount my 2x2 construction. Once I get the 2x2 construction in, this plywood will come in and sit on top of that 2x2, and everything will be perfectly flush. This plywood will be set into the framing. A little bit complicated way of doing it, definitely more advanced, but it's a much cleaner look. Another thing I'm doing is I'm using a gauge block to put into place to kind of represent where this 2x2 is going to go across, okay, because it's got to tie into this. And so if I ran this all the way across, I'd have nothing for it to screw into here. Then my front one will go from here to here, and then the back one will do the same thing from here to here. And I'm doing these side and back ones first as opposed to doing the front one. The front one is obviously going to be the easiest, but if you do the front one first, then I can't get in here and work. So it's easier, and sorry, I'm in a really tight spot inside of this thing, but it's easier for me to actually get in here, do the sides, and make my marks with my gauge, and then cut to fit, as opposed to doing the front and then trying to work my way around it. All finished with the first shelf at the top. Everything came out very nicely. I did add a center 2x2 just to help support, even though it's not a very large span. I'm using 1/4 inch material, and I'm not exactly sure how much weight are going to be put on these shelves. Turned out very nice. Now I've just got to repeat that process, I believe 4 more times. It's actually going to be 5 shelves, and then if you include the bottom, that'll be the 6th storage area. And I'm going to need a whole lot more 2x2s, so I'm going to go rip some. Now that I've got 3 of these all framed out, I'm going to show you really quickly how I do it. So once you get your first couple shelves up, then you can figure out your math between them. 15 inches down, make a mark. I'm going to take my level. This is a 1 foot level. It works great because I'm in a confined area. Make a level mark. Now, because of how this framing is, because I used a 2x2 here, this board has to run through. Okay, and over here you'll see this board runs through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my gauge block, I'm going to make a mark over here. Now that allows me to go ahead and start at the back sector of this shelf and get my measurement. So we're going to go 14 3/4. And now that I've got the back piece mounted, I've got my gauge block, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball level. Put my gauge block here, mark it. Okay, we've got 15.5. We know that that's level, so we can mount this board on this side perfectly flush. Okay, and then on this board, I'm leaving it detached. And then all I'm doing is I'm putting my level on it. And you could bump it up or down. And then when you get it perfectly level, you're going to go ahead and attach it. Repeat the process on this side. And then lastly, come across. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my center board. I'll come back in and I'll add my blocks on the outside. These are going to help stiffen this up and then give me something to shoot this plywood to. But once I have two, I know what my measurement's going to be, and I could just speed frame all the rest of the shelves and just work my way down. I used a 1/4 inch gauge block, so I used that to do this. I really wanted my plywood to be flush with the framing to enable me to be able to slide things over this framing if I need another couple inches. I just want to do a square cut. Typically, I would run this through and run that back through and then put my 3 parts in the middle, butting the 2 front and back. But because that back corner is a 2x2, I had to run this one all the way through. If that would have been a 2x4, it would have caused me no issues. The only reason I used a 2x2 there was to try to save material, but it caused a little bit more problems and a little bit more complication with the measuring and cutting and piecing it together. Okay, everything is framed up on this shelving unit. This tall side is going to be for fishing rods, and this side is just going to be for, I guess, tackle, and then other things that I could put in there just in general storage. Of course, this one's all framed up, the lower section for boat motors, and then up top is going to be for general storage. And I also made these to the dimension of these totes. Next step is to go ahead and cut my OSB and put my shelves in. And once I do that on both units, I'm going to take my OSB and cover the sides. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and frame my upper cabinets. Then we'll come in and do the workbench area. And once we have all the workbench, uppers, and then side built-in units done, I will come back with that 1/4 inch panel material and then cover all the faces and finished sides that you're going to see, and then trim it out really nice to give it a really good look. I couldn't fit a solid piece in due to my framing setup, and my pieces are larger than the space necessary to get them in place, so I'm having to actually 2-piece it. I'm using 1 1/4 16 gauge nails and my Porter cable nail gun. I'm going to go ahead and install my end cap. I've decided I'm going to use 2x4 stock, but I'm going to run it through the table saw and rip it down to a 2-inch width. That 2-inch width just gives me a little bit more clearance to be able to squeeze things into these shelves. And this shows the ultimate goal is for this side cabinet to be a full rod locker for my fishing rods to keep them out of the garage and out of the way. Went ahead and plywooded the sides on both units, and we are actually at a stopping point now on these as far as completion. I'm going to go ahead and at this point move on to framing the upper cabinet section, and then once that's complete, come down and then do the bottom. Then go on the wall, do the floating shelves and the pegboard. If you like what you see so far, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I feel this garage is going to be really awesome when it's done, and I'm going to continue to keep you guys updated with more videos to come right here on my channel. Thanks again for joining me.